The steam hissed like a rattlesnake, and Martha Hale tightened her grip on her son's hand. Jacob, barely 10, squinted against the morning sun, his small face flushed with excitement. The train was a marvel to him. Coal-streaked metal, thundering wheels, the shriek of its whistle echoing through the sandstone cliffs like a war cry. For Martha it was just noise. Everything had been noise since Thomas died. The platform in Redstone Junction was empty save for a drunk curled beneath a stack of crates and an old woman hawking biscuits out of a frayed basket. Martha had no appetite, not for food, not for memories. She glanced down at the simple locket around her neck. Inside, a tiny sketch of Thomas's face. It weighed heavier than iron. "Ma," Jacob said, tugging on her skirts, "you think they'll have real cowboys in Copper Bend?" "Maybe," she replied, managing a smile. "Maybe even one who doesn't smell like horse and trouble." Jacob grinned, satisfied. He wore Thomas's old leather belt, cinched too tight on his narrow frame, and a toy revolver rested awkwardly in the holster. He fancied himself a gunslinger already, like the storybook said. She had wanted to take it from him, thought it was disrespectful somehow, but in the end he had needed the armor more than she needed the symbolism. The conductor waved them aboard. She helped Jacob into the car, lifting him onto the worn wooden seat before taking her own beside him. The train jerked, hissed, then began to pull forward with a slow, rhythmic chug. The red earth outside rolled past in waves of dust and sagebrush, the desert stretching wide in all directions. They had left everything behind in Arkansas. Nothing to go back to, just a bullet-ridden homestead, a burnt barn, and a name whispered in the mouths of killers. Her fingers still trembled when she thought of it. Of the night Thomas hadn't come back from patrol. Of the way the marshal had lowered his eyes when he told her who had done it. Again. No name, no faces, just men who laughed while they shot him in the chest and stole his horse. Martha hadn't cried in front of Jacob. She had waited until the boy was asleep, then buried her face in Thomas's old coat and let the storm break in silence. Now they were headed west. Copper Bend, a mining boomtown said to be clean of war, clean of blood. She had a distant cousin there, someone with land and maybe enough kindness to let her and Jacob start over. The future was a question mark. But at least it was a question still worth asking. Jacob pressed his face to the window. "Look at those rocks, Ma. Like towers." "Those are hoodoos," she replied. "Wind made 'em that way. You think we'll see buffalo?" "I think you'll see more dust than anything." The boy laughed. Martha envied his joy. It came so easily, unbroken by what had come before. The train began to slow. She frowned. There was no station in sight, just open land, scattered mesquite, and a jagged outcrop that loomed like a broken tooth. The whistle didn't blow. There was no announcement. Just the gradual grind of wheels. "Stay in your seat," she told Jacob, standing carefully. Her heart was already tightening. Outside, a black horse galloped across the rise. Then another. Then 4. She felt it before she saw it, wrongness like a dropped mirror. The conductor burst through the far door, face pale. "Bandits," he shouted. "Everyone down." Screams tore through the passenger car. People ducked. One man tried to climb out a window and got stuck. Martha grabbed Jacob and shoved him beneath the seat. "Don't move," she whispered. "No matter what." Gunfire cracked outside, sharp and fast. The train lurched to a halt. She pulled her small revolver from her bag, Thomas's, worn and low on bullets, and crept toward the rear door. The world had become smoke and noise, horses circling like wolves. Bandits wore scarves over their faces, rifles slung low. One of them shouted to the others, "Get the safe. Leave the women." Another voice, calm and cold, replied, "No, look sharp. She's on board." Martha froze. Her breath caught in her chest like ice. Then she saw him. A tall man in a battered duster, eyes hidden behind brass-rimmed goggles, his hat pulled low. The scarf around his neck bore the symbol, an iron hook. The same one carved into Thomas's skin the day they found him. She knew that face beneath the cloth. She would never forget it. She backed into the shadows, heart racing. One of them had recognized her. They were here not just to rob, but to finish the job. A scream echoed from the front of the train. Martha pushed through the smoke, her every instinct screaming to get to her son. But as she turned the corner, 2 men leapt onto the platform outside their car. The glass behind her shattered as gunfire punched through it. She dove to the floor, rolled beneath the seats, reached out blindly, and felt Jacob's hand. But then it was gone. The man with the goggles grabbed Jacob by the collar and yanked him out from under the bench. The boy kicked, screamed. Martha tried to rise, but something slammed into her side. A boot, a rifle stock, she wasn't sure. Her breath left her in a sharp gasp. The floor spun. Jacob's voice faded as they dragged him out the rear door. "No, please no," she screamed, scrambling after them. Blood ran down her cheek. The revolver was gone. She burst through the back door of the train just in time to see the horses gallop off, her son thrown like a sack across the saddle of the man with goggles. The others mounted behind him. The train's engineer lay slumped over, his body still twitching. "Mama!" Jacob cried, voice carried by the wind. Martha ran after them. She didn't care about bullets or pain. But the horses were too fast. Within seconds they were gone, disappearing into the canyons like phantoms. She fell to her knees in the dust. Smoke drifted up behind her, curling into the air like ghosts. The train burned in patches. Somewhere behind her, a woman sobbed. A baby wailed. The world reeled. They had taken her son. They had killed her husband. And now they had taken her son. For a long moment she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her hands clenched in the dirt, blood and gravel cutting into her palms. Then she stood. She walked to the rear of the train where the ground was still churned with hoofprints. Bent low, fingers grazing the dirt, she found something small, Jacob's toy gun. The handle was cracked. She tucked it into her pocket. The wind picked up, rustling her skirt. In the distance, the canyon walls stood silent, ancient, unmoved by tragedy. She turned toward them. She was alone. No map, no horse, no help. But she would find them. If it took every breath she had left. The sun burned higher in the sky. Her shadow stretched long and thin behind her as she walked toward the horizon. Each step was pain. Each breath was grief. But it was also fire. She didn't know what waited beyond the canyon. Only that Jacob was out there. And that hell was about to follow. The desert didn't care about grief. It baked the bones of the living and buried the dead without ceremony. Martha trudged along the broken trail, dust choking her lungs, sunburn stinging her cheeks. Each footstep was a vow. Her son was somewhere beyond the buttes, and every hour she wasted was another chance the outlaws had to vanish into the wild. She hadn't cried, not since the train. Her body was too dry for tears. The sky above was a flat, merciless blue, and her shadow was the only company she kept. Blood still stained the side of her blouse, dried and itching. Her boots had blistered her feet raw. But she walked. No weapon. No horse. No food. Nothing but the toy revolver in her coat pocket and a fire behind her ribs. By midday the buzzards had begun to circle. She nearly didn't see the wagon. It sat like a broken beetle beneath a dead mesquite tree, one wheel splintered and half dug into the dirt. A man knelt beside it, sleeves rolled, face hidden beneath a wide hat. His fingers worked slow and methodical on the busted axle, as if the world wasn't full of killers and smoke. A chestnut stallion stood nearby, tethered to the branches, its coat gleaming with sweat. Martha hesitated, one hand shielding her eyes. The man looked up. He wasn't young. Mid-30s, maybe 40, skin bronzed by sun and wind, his jaw rough with black stubble. His eyes were a kind of gray that didn't flinch. There was no surprise in them, only curiosity, like he'd been expecting her somehow. "You walkin' or runnin'?" he asked. She didn't answer. He stood. Tall. Broad. Dusty. A revolver hung low at his hip. His coat was patched in places but clean. A man who knew how to keep things in working order. She judged the distance between them. Close enough for conversation. Too far to strike. He watched her think. "I ain't with them," he said. "What makes you think I thought you were?" He smirked faintly. "Folks who come out of the smoke like you don't stop for conversation unless they're looking for something. Or someone. I'm looking for my son." Something changed in his expression. Not pity, something quieter. Recognition. What happened? The Callahan gang. They stopped the train outside Redstone. Took him. Rode west. His jaw tightened. He looked away as if measuring the weight of something unspeakable. "I got water," he said after a moment, nodding toward the wagon. "A little bread. Might not taste like much, but it's better than your boots." She wanted to refuse. Pride swelled in her like a blister. But Jacob was out there, and she wouldn't reach him if she dropped dead from heatstroke. She approached slowly. He didn't flinch. When she reached the wagon, she took the canteen he offered and drank deeply. The water was warm, but it didn't matter. Her body hummed with gratitude. He watched her in silence. "Name's Wade Colton," he said. "You?" "Martha Hale." He nodded. "You know which way they went?" "Canyon country. Tracks headed that way. I followed as far as I could, but I lost the trail." "They don't leave a trail you can follow. Not unless they want to." Callahan's smart that way. You know them? Know of them. Samuel Callahan's been running men through this stretch for 5 years. Robbery, extortion, murder. Used to ride for the Confederates. When the war ended, he didn't. She sat on the edge of the wagon, breathing hard. Her legs ached. Her fingers trembled around the canteen. My husband served too, she said, voice brittle. Union. He came home with more ghosts than medals. They found him 2 weeks ago. Shot in the back. Same gang. Wade was quiet a long moment. I had a wife, he said finally, and a daughter. They were heading to Fort Mason when Callahan's boys ambushed the caravan. Didn't leave much to bury. Their eyes met across the heat. So what now? She asked. Wade looked toward the horizon. Now. I finish fixin' this wheel. Then I ride. Alone? He shrugged. That's how I've been doing it. I need your help. You need a posse, a map, and 3 days head start. I ain't none of those. But you know the land. Plenty do. You know them. He didn't answer. Martha stood. Her voice was sharp now, steadier than she expected. Look, I'm not asking you to kill them all. I'm not asking you to ride into hell for me. I just want to find my boy before they break him. Wade studied her. She saw the war behind his eyes, the guilt, the miles, the dead names he'd buried. Then he sighed. Kid's got grit, being your son, he said. I reckon that's worth something. He finished wrapping the axle, then strapped it tight. The wheel still wobbled, but it would hold. He whistled to the stallion. Hop on my horse, he said, not looking at her. We ride light. Fast. No promises. She hesitated, then climbed up behind him. The stallion moved like lightning, hooves pounding the sand as they left the wrecked wagon behind. Wind tore at her hair, dust stung her eyes, but she clung to Wade's back, heart pounding. The landscape blurred, burnt trees, dry arroyos, cliffs carved by centuries of wind. Wade didn't speak for a long time. Then, just above the thunder of hooves, he said, If we find him, it won't be pretty. I don't care. If it's too late. It won't be. He didn't argue. They stopped only once that night, just long enough to water the horse and let the sky turn black. They sat beside a rock outcrop, fireless. Stars blinked overhead. The desert cooled quickly and Martha pulled her coat tighter. You any good with a gun? Wade asked. I shot a coyote once. Near the chicken coop. He didn't laugh. That's something. Jacob thinks he's a cowboy, she said softly. Used to make his father tie him to the saddle with ropes so he could ride longer. He called himself Sheriff Hale. Had a badge made out of tin. Wade leaned back against the stone. My girl used to play outlaw. Said being the sheriff was boring. No one ever wins. Silence followed. But it was a shared silence now. Martha stared into the dark. Her fingers found the toy gun in her pocket again. She held it gently like a relic. Why'd you decide to help me? Wade scratched his jaw. Been hunting Callahan for years. Thought I'd finish it alone. But maybe you reminded me what it's for. Revenge don't carry the weight hope does. She looked over at him. Do you think we'll find him in time? He didn't lie. I don't know, he said. Then after a moment, but I ain't riding for nothing. The moon rose higher, casting the desert in silver. Martha didn't sleep that night. She listened to the wind and thought of Jacob's voice echoing through the canyon. Thought of Thomas. Thought of how easy it had been to fall apart, and how much harder it would be to hold herself together. When the sun came again, she was ready. They rode before dawn, chasing the ghosts of hoofprints. And behind them, the wind carried only the sound of grit, hoofbeats, and the whisper of something coming. The sun crept over the jagged hills like a beast awakening, spilling golden light across the rocks and turning the canyon walls the color of blood. Martha and Wade rode in silence. The air was still cool, but it carried the promise of another blistering day. The trail had narrowed, winding through twisted stone spires and gorges too tight for wagons. It wasn't the kind of place a normal gang would hide, but the Callahan crew wasn't normal. Martha scanned every crevice, every shaded hollow. Her eyes ached from the effort, but she wouldn't stop. Not when she could still see Jacob's face, his terrified eyes looking back from the saddle of a stranger. Wade brought the horse to a slow halt at the edge of a ridge. Below them, the land dropped into a dry basin, cracked and bare. At its center stood a shack, leaning, crooked but intact. A single horse was tied to a post, head low with fatigue. Wade dismounted first. His revolver was in his hand before his boots hit the ground. One of Callahan's men, he said quietly. Scout maybe. Look out. Could be where they're keeping him? He shook his head. Too exposed. This is just bait. Or a stopover. Still he didn't turn away. I'm going down there, Martha said. Wade's eyes narrowed. No, you're not. She met his gaze without blinking. That's my son they took. If there's even a chance he's in there, I have to know. You want to get shot through the door before you find out? I want my boy back. Wade exhaled, jaw tight. Then, after a beat, he handed her a second pistol, short-barreled, with a smooth ivory grip. Lighter than Thomas's, but with a weight that meant business. Stay behind me. Keep your steps quiet. They descended together, the crunch of gravel underfoot like thunder in the silence. Closer now, Martha could see the shape of someone inside, moving slowly, dragging something heavy across the floor. Wade moved like smoke, smooth, deliberate, without a wasted motion. He reached the wall beside the door and raised a finger. 1, 2. He kicked the door open. Don't move. Martha followed, gun raised. The man inside froze mid-step, his hands up. His hat fell back to reveal a young face, maybe 19, maybe 20, with sunburned cheeks and fear in his eyes. He was trying to lift a crate, food supplies, maybe whiskey. I'm not with him anymore, the boy blurted. I swear, Callahan left me here 2 days back. Said I was too slow. Took the rest and rode south. Wade didn't lower the gun. Where'd they go? The boy swallowed. Through Devil's Spine. You follow the gulch till it narrows. There's a place, caves in the rock, deep enough to hide a regiment. You see a boy with them? Small. Blonde hair. Martha's heart kicked. Yes. The boy nodded fast. Callahan's got him riding with Graves. Said the kid's smart, quiet. Keeps to himself. They feed him. But what? The boy hesitated. Graves, he's not right. Hurts people. Gets twitchy if he don't. Martha stepped forward, the pistol trembling in her grip. What's your name? Eli. Eli, if you're lying, I will shoot you. I ain't lying, he said wide-eyed. I left 'cause of the kid. I couldn't stomach it no more. I swear to God. Wade holstered his gun. Let's tie him up. If he's telling the truth, we'll come back for him. They found some rope and lashed Eli to a beam inside the shack. He didn't fight. Just sat there, slumped and shaking. Back on the horse they rode hard. The land changed as they moved, more brush, more shadow. The canyons deepened. Cactus sprouted like watchmen along the ridges. Buzzards circled again and the wind shifted. By midday they reached a cut in the rock. Devil's Spine was well named, sharp cliffs, jagged edges, and a gulch so narrow even the sun seemed hesitant to enter. Wade led the stallion through on foot, his gun always drawn, his steps careful. Then they heard it. A voice. Singing. Slow, off-key, drifting on the still air. Martha stopped breathing. Wade crept forward, motioning her down. Through a gap in the rock they saw them. A fire burned low in the clearing beyond. 3 men sat near it, dirty, armed, laughing. One of them had a scar that split his lip into a permanent sneer. Another cleaned his rifle with a rag soaked in something dark. The third sang tunelessly while sharpening a knife. And there, sitting beside a battered crate, was Jacob. He was thinner, dirty, and his face had a bruise near the temple. But he was alive. Watching. Waiting. Martha's mouth opened, but Wade caught her arm. Too many, he whispered. We go in loud, someone's gonna die. Might be him. Her fingers clenched the pistol. What do we do? I'll draw them out. You grab the boy. Head for that rise to the east. Horse is tied there. If you get to it, ride. She stared at him. You'll be killed. Wade gave her a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Maybe. But I don't aim to let that boy die. He stood. Moved fast. A rock went flying into the clearing. Hey. Wade's voice rang out, sharp as a rifle crack. The men jumped. The one with the scar grabbed his gun. Wade appeared atop the ledge. You boys got something of mine. Who the hell? Gunfire erupted. Wade dropped from view, but his shots echoed, 2, 3 each, spaced like a drumbeat. The men scattered, yelling. Martha ran. She reached Jacob in seconds. His eyes widened with disbelief, then joy. Mama? Come on. Can you run? He nodded. She grabbed his hand and pulled him through the brush. Bullets zipped past. One smacked into a rock inches from her skull. They didn't stop. She saw the stallion. Nodded. Pulled Jacob up behind her. Wade was still firing. Go, he shouted. Now. She hesitated, heart screaming. Wade turned, fired again, and staggered. Blood sprayed from his shoulder. Martha kicked the horse. They galloped through the canyon, hooves striking stone. Jacob clung to her, sobbing, and she held him tight. Behind them the gunfire faded. Then silence. They rode until the sky turned orange. When they finally stopped, it was beside a creek. Jacob slid down first, wobbly but alive. Martha dismounted, then sank to her knees and pulled him into her arms. The boy cried into her shoulder. She let herself cry too, just once. She checked him for wounds. Nothing serious. Just bruises. Scratches. He was whole. Is the man okay? Jacob asked. She looked back toward the horizon. I don't know, she whispered. But he gave us a chance. That night, under the stars, they didn't sleep. They just held on to each other, listening for hoofbeats in the dark, hoping against hope Wade Colton would come riding through the dust once more. The morning brought silence. No gunshots, no cries, just the hush of wind through mesquite and the quiet bubbling of the creek. Martha sat cross-legged on a flat rock, cleaning the pistol Wade had given her. Her hands trembled, though not from fear anymore. She was exhausted, sore, and full of a kind of terrible clarity. Jacob was alive. But Wade was somewhere back in that canyon, bleeding or worse, and she couldn't pretend that their escape was anything close to a victory. Jacob chewed a piece of jerky, his face hollow-eyed but attentive. He hadn't said much since they fled the ambush. The boy had always been talkative before, full of cowboy dreams and wild stories. Now he stared at the trees like he expected them to move. I should have stayed, Martha said quietly, more to herself than to him. Jacob looked up. No. You told us to go. You saved me, Mama. She reached out, brushing the dust from his cheek. His skin was sunburned, his clothes torn, and his small frame felt lighter than it should have. But he was warm, breathing. Real. He saved us both, she murmured. Jacob nodded. Will he come back? Martha didn't answer. She didn't want to lie. She rose, tucking the pistol into her waistband. The stallion stood nearby, munching weeds, tired but loyal. The saddle was still bloody where Wade had sat. She stared at it for a moment too long, then turned back to her son. We can't stay here. They might follow. Jacob stood, squaring his small shoulders. Where do we go? East. We find a town. Shelter. Then we come back. To help him. Yes. He didn't hesitate. Okay. They rode without speaking. The canyon thinned into high country, scrubland dotted with boulders and twisted pine. Buzzards circled overhead, lazy but ominous. The wind kicked up sand and pine needles in equal measure, and Martha found herself gripping the reins tighter with every mile. She didn't know if they were being followed. That was the hardest part, not knowing. They reached a dry bluff by mid-afternoon. Below it, nestled between two ridges, lay a town. Not a big one, maybe 20 buildings, a faded sign that read, Whiskey Bend, and a single plume of smoke curling from a chimney. Martha dismounted and helped Jacob down. They walked the last stretch, the stallion trailing behind like a ghost. The town barely looked up as they entered. A drunk leaned against a post outside the saloon. A woman swept the porch of a general store. Somewhere a dog barked, half-hearted and tired. They made for the sheriff's office, a square building with barred windows and a chipped door. Inside the air was thick with dust and disinterest. A man in a frayed tan coat sat behind a desk, boots up, reading a week-old paper. He looked up slowly. Help you. I need a doctor, Martha said, and someone who can help me find a man who might be dying out west of Devil's Spine. The sheriff blinked. You say west of Devil's Spine? Yes. You ain't right in the head, lady. That's outlaw land. Ain't no one goes out that way unless they got a death wish. I've already been. The sheriff snorted. Then you're lucky to be breathing. Who's this man you lost? Wade Colton. That made the boots come down. The sheriff sat up straight. Colton? The bounty hunter. Martha nodded. He helped me rescue my son. Got shot doing it. I left him behind. The sheriff exhaled slowly like the name carried weight. Well, hell, he muttered. He's been on Callahan's trail for years. Half the marshals west of Abilene know the name. Some thought he was already dead. He's not. Not unless you let him be. The sheriff rubbed his jaw. Even if I wanted to send someone, I got one deputy. Kid's got a bad leg. And I ain't dragging good folks into a canyon war. Martha stepped forward. He saved a child. My child. I'm not asking for a war. Just a horse. Supplies. And a direction. He looked at Jacob, dusty, quiet, watchful. Your boy. Yes. Brave kid. He is. The sheriff sighed again. Doctor's 2 doors down. You get the kid patched up. I'll see what I can scrounge. But I ain't promising a cavalry charge. That's fine. I ride alone. The next 2 hours passed in a haze. The doctor was an older man with a gentle touch and bad breath, but he stitched Jacob's cut, cleaned the bruises, and gave Martha a tin of salve that smelled like mint and death. They ate at the town's only inn, bread, cheese, and warm beans. Jacob fell asleep before his plate was clean. Martha sat beside him, hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee that tasted like boiled rope. Her eyes stayed on the horizon beyond the window toward the canyon. When the sheriff returned, he brought news and a face. "This here's Clay," he said. "Used to ride with a scouting party out near those caves. Knows the land better than most." Clay was wiry, with a scar across his nose and a twitch in his left hand. But he looked alert and his eyes were sharp. "Colton's alive?" he asked. "I hope so," Martha replied. "Then we better ride tonight. If Callahan's regrouping, that place'll be a hornet's nest come sunrise." "I'm going," she said without hesitation. Clay didn't argue. By nightfall, Jacob was tucked safely into a bed at the inn, guarded by the sheriff himself. Martha saddled the stallion, took the rifle Clay offered, and followed him into the dusk. The ride was brutal. Cold winds swept through the scrublands and shadows danced along the ridgelines. Martha's legs ached and her mind kept flashing back. Wade standing on that ridge, blood spreading across his shirt, telling her to run. They reached the edge of Devil's Spine just before dawn. The first hints of light turned the rocks blue and silver. Clay stopped near a low rise, motioning for silence. "We'll go slow," he whispered. "If he's alive, he's either hidden or captured. Either way, we don't charge in." They moved on foot, leading the horses. The wind howled through the canyon's throat, but beneath it came something else. Gunfire. Muffled. Distant. Then nothing. They sprinted the rest of the way. Martha reached the ridge first, heart in her throat. Below, in the same clearing where Jacob had been held, the fire still burned. 2 bodies lay near it, motionless. Another crawled, groaning, dragging himself toward the trees. And there, slumped against a rock, one hand clutching his bleeding side, was Wade. She slid down the slope, knees scraping on stone. He looked up as she approached, his face pale, beard darker with sweat. "You came back," he rasped. "Damn right I did." He smiled faintly, eyes drifting shut. Martha dropped beside him, pressing the cloth to his wound. "Stay awake. Did you find Jacob?" "He's safe. We're safe." "Good," he murmured. "That's all I wanted." Clay arrived moments later, gun raised. "Those 3 are dead. Fort's missing a leg now. He won't get far." Martha ignored him. Her hands were shaking again. But this time it wasn't fear. "You hold on, Wade Colton," she whispered. "We're not done yet." And in his fading breath, she heard the faintest echo of a laugh, like someone who'd finally outrun the ghosts. The sun crawled higher, smearing gold across the canyon walls as if the land itself were bleeding light. Martha knelt beside Wade, her palms slick with blood that wouldn't stop flowing. His face had turned ghostly, streaked with grime and sweat, but his eyes remained fixed on her, as if drawing strength from her presence alone. Clay crouched nearby, scanning the ridge with his rifle balanced across his knees. "We can't stay here," he muttered. "If any of Callahan's men are left, they'll come sniffing before long." Martha nodded, not looking away from Wade. "He can't ride." Clay sighed. "Then we carry him." Wade chuckled, a hoarse, dry sound like sand scraping metal. "Don't be stupid. You leave me. You both leave me." "You saved my son," Martha whispered. "That earns you more than a grave under these rocks." Wade's lips curled faintly. "Didn't do it for a reward." "You did it for something better," she said. "Now let me return the damn favor." They fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches and a saddle blanket. Clay took the front, Martha the rear. Every jolt made Wade groan through gritted teeth, but he never asked them to stop. The trail out of Devil's Spine was steep, narrow, and treacherous. Twice Martha lost her footing, her knees buckling under Wade's weight. But she kept going. She had carried grief longer than this. She could carry hope too. By dusk they reached a flat overlook, where Clay's second horse had been tethered. The stallion was gone, likely spooked by the gunfire, but the second horse remained, ears twitching, breath fogging the cool evening air. Clay hoisted Wade across the saddle, then helped Martha climb up behind to steady him. She wrapped her arms around Wade's limp torso, holding him upright as the horse began the slow descent east. Wade drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he muttered names, none Martha recognized. Sometimes he asked for water. Once he asked if Jacob was still alive. She answered yes each time. Not because it was the right thing to say, but because it was true. Wade had saved something no bullet could take away. They rode all night. Stars wheeled overhead. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the land breathed a cold wind that whispered secrets in the dark. Martha never let go of him. When his weight sagged, she pulled him closer. When he trembled, she whispered quiet words into his ear. Memories, promises, anything to anchor him. Whiskey Bend appeared just before dawn, a halo of lanterns glowing like fireflies on the horizon. Martha spurred the horse to a gallop, teeth gritted against the pain in her spine and thighs. The sheriff was waiting outside the inn, Jacob at his side, wrapped in a blanket, rubbing his eyes. "Mama," he cried, running forward. "Not now," she said gently. "Help us get him inside." They carried Wade into the doctor's office. The old man looked half asleep until he saw the blood. Then he was all hands and muttered curses, demanding thread, heat, and space. Martha backed away only when ordered, standing outside the room with Jacob clutching her hand. They waited. Hours passed. Morning turned into afternoon. Every time the door creaked, her heart jumped. Finally the doctor emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth redder than his coat. He sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "He's alive," he said. "Barely." Martha's breath caught. "But he's strong. That man doesn't want to die, and sometimes that's enough." She went to see him at once. Wade lay on a cot, bandaged across the chest, breathing shallow but steady. One eye opened as she approached. "Back already?" he rasped. "You're hard to kill." He gave the faintest smile. "Damn right I am." Martha sat beside him, taking his hand. It was warm. Alive. She hadn't expected the relief to hit so hard. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. "I thought you had." They sat in silence for a long while. Outside, the town stirred, boots on wooden porches, laughter from the saloon, the faint clink of tools against metal. But inside, the world had narrowed to just them. "You could have left me," he said after a while. "You should have." "I couldn't. You had your son. You had everything. I didn't have you." His eyes met hers, wide and raw. For once, Wade Colton, the bounty hunter, the ghost rider, the man with 1,000 regrets, had no comeback. Later that evening, Jacob came in with a bundle of flowers he'd picked near the creek. He placed them on Wade's bedside, then climbed onto the cot's edge. "You gonna teach me how to shoot someday?" he asked. Wade grinned. "Soon as your mama lets me." Martha raised an eyebrow. "Only if you teach him how to pick his battles." "I reckon he's already learning that." In the days that followed, Wade healed slowly. The sheriff brought news. Callahan's gang had scattered. Some killed, others on the run. With Graves gone and Eli's testimony, lawmen had warrants in every direction. Wade would have his peace at last. Or something like it. On the fourth morning, Martha sat outside the doctor's office, watching the sun rise. Wade limped out beside her, leaning on a crutch. "You'll be riding again soon," she said. He chuckled. "I'm thinking about retiring." "To what? Farming?" "Something quieter. A porch. A dog. Maybe someone to argue with when the sun goes down." She looked up at him. "You think you could stay here?" "I think I could try." They didn't speak for a long time after that. No need to. That evening, the town gathered at the saloon. Not for a celebration, no one dared call it that, but for something like it. There were drinks, music from an out-of-tune piano, and stories traded over tables sticky with spilled beer. Martha watched from the doorway, Jacob on her lap. Wade leaned against the wall beside them, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room. "You ready?" she asked. He nodded. "Let's tell it." They stepped inside and the crowd quieted. Martha told them everything, how Thomas had been murdered, how Jacob was taken, how Wade rode with her into the jaws of hell and brought him back. She didn't hold back the fear, the loss, the rage. But she ended with gratitude. And hope. When she finished, there was silence. Then applause. Then a toast. "To the boy," someone called. "To the mother," another said. And finally from the back, the sheriff's voice rose loud and clear. "To Wade Colton, the man who wouldn't let the West swallow him whole." Martha looked at Wade. He was smiling, not his usual half grin, but something real, something wide and quiet and whole. She smiled back. The night wore on. Jacob fell asleep at the table. Martha carried him outside, laid him across the saddle of the old stallion, and turned to Wade. "You still think about the things you lost?" she asked. "Sometimes. I do too. But now I've got something else." He mounted behind her, one arm steadying her waist. "What's that?" he asked. She looked ahead to the road beyond the ridge, where the stars burned bright over endless miles. A future. And together they rode into it, Three shadows against a rising moon, the dust of old grief left behind in the canyons, and the promise of something new waiting just beyond the next bend.